Hey, welcome to our Leaf Learning Journey with Kinobe. And we're glad that you're in town. I've been doing learning journeys for 7 years now, and we do them periodically at the moment as we get into our new flow, and we do them monthly as part of our continued exploration to keep learning, to stay curious, and to learn about leaders in our community and the world and places and people and cultures that we may not have the opportunity to always have good and close proximity with. So the conversation today is going to be about what does it mean to be a global citizen from Kinobe's perspective, and also to talk about Ethno Camp USA that's going to be, or Ethno USA, that's going to be part of the Leaf Festival this October.
Yeah.
And to take us on a little bit of a journey so that several of us will have a larger perspective as we step into this place of connecting to the world in new ways this fall.
Thank you. This is amazing. It's, I came to Leaf many years ago as a young performing artist. I didn't envision this time. I didn't envision, of course, Leaf was among so many festivals and performing arts communities where I brought my music with my band from Uganda. Young musicians from Uganda traveling across the world, performing, playing 5 shows in 5 days sometimes. So I did not envision that many years after, I would feel a sense of belonging and have such a connection to this community, where from the first time I came, what I realized was it was a family-friendly place. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my story and how I feel, but most important, we are all here as members, as lovers for Leaf. So this is specifically in connection with Leaf and what Leaf is doing. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit about the ethno camps, which I happen to be a part of. I think I was 13 or 14, somewhere in Belgium and Slovenia and Germany in my earlier stages as an artist. So to me, citizenship, first of all, in my opinion, is a sense of belonging. When you feel a sense of belonging somewhere, then you feel calm, you feel home, and that sense of belonging, it's not, in my opinion, about property, it's about people. If people make you feel welcome, if people make you feel that you have value, if people make you feel that that sense of love and sense of support, and that sense of belonging for me is what creates a feeling of feeling, that kind of citizenship. And then global citizenship is the sense, in my opinion, where you'd feel that you can travel wherever you want to travel. You can meet people from all places. It's linked with diversity. And where I grew up in Uganda, sometimes you have issues where, for example, people in one community don't even cross to go over into another community for many reasons. They go to school there, they learn the language there, and they don't even have an idea what's going on 25 miles away. So at a very young age, I was 9 years, by the way, when I did my first international tour in Europe, performing in Netherlands. I was 9, that's another whole story. But on that tour, Festival Mondial in Netherlands, we were hosted in families. So it was the first time I stayed in a family that was looking different than me, in a family that wasn't black, a family that wasn't. And I remember getting a pen from Uganda and my mom was at the airport crying, and I saw her kind of almost regretting why she had let me, travel. So being in a different community, in a different country, in a different place, and feeling that sense of love from people who were not part of my upbringing just changed everything for me. And we stayed there for 2 months. 2 months later, we returned to Uganda. So on this festival, there were groups of children from over 60 different countries. And it was the first time I saw music and people from other countries other than my country. Just 3 months of music, going to schools, going to theaters. But we could not, that time my English wasn't great, wasn't good actually. And other kids from China, from Taiwan, from India, from Zanzibar, from everywhere. Each of the groups, they were speaking their own languages. So we used to meet, have lunch and dinner, and we could not communicate. But we could communicate through smiling, through laughing, through singing songs. So music became pretty much a language of communication. After like 2 weeks, there was an affection with a lot of these kids from different parts of the world, but there was no language that we could communicate. So music started to feel like it was breaking those barriers of communication. And so when I returned to Uganda, I had a whole different perspective of what the world is. And in Uganda, when I went home, most of my friends had never traveled out of the country. So for years, I kept on telling these stories. So at that point, when I walked up to the stage in Amsterdam with my kalimba, and I started to play, and having this kind of, response and love from the community, from the audience, it was a different feeling, because culture music where I come from was, and still is something that we did not see as something that has value. And so for me, it was now becoming it was becoming the key to allow me to travel. So after visiting maybe 5-6 different countries, I started to enjoy and love things about places, the weather, the food, the people, the stories. And I think at that point, that's when I began feeling more like I was a global citizen, because I went to countries, I played my music, and people had this love for the music. They had no idea which language I was singing in. They had no idea about the instruments I was playing, but they had the love for the sound and for the music. And so later on, when I got into social work with UNICEF, that is when I found true purpose. And at that point, I think I started to realize that there's a lot of talent, but there's a lack of opportunities. So I set out, I think at a very young age, I set out, a mission to try and create opportunities for other young artists, other young people who had a love for art and for music, and helping them understand that music and art is going to be their path for making friends, for traveling around the world, and for breaking those stereotypes and barriers. Because that time, many kids were going to school hoping to get a good job. They were going to school hoping to have a great life. But I felt there was so much in music and art and culture that was unique to Uganda, and every country has a unique culture. But I feel that culture, the people that own that culture, they need to figure out a way of seeing it as something valuable, as something precious, and that can become their path to the world. So for me, if it wasn't for the music, I wouldn't have been able to, today I speak 5 different languages. Countries I've been to, I've traveled to 75 countries. Now, I've worked with communities of all backgrounds in terms of everything, politically, religiously, racially. So I felt, and I felt almost like art is the only avenue today And that still rings true because I think there are like 4 different avenues that allow people coming together. You have, sports. Even though with sports, I feel people who support the same team end up in the same room, and there's no much of a dialogue from other opinions. And I feel, religious places gather people only that kind of believe and follow those religious places. And then you have the political spaces that usually gather people that have similar political opinions. And I feel art has the power to gather the people from all those other 3 different places in the same room and actually get them to listen to music. And if you ask them to dance, they will dance on the same beat. So at that point, with the world kind of going crazy, as musicians, we started to go to countries that would have never expected to go. I went to Djibouti, I went to Mayotte, Slovenia, in Prague, Argentina. It wasn't about the language, it wasn't about the economical capacities, it wasn't about wealth, it was just about music. So to me, my friends in Uganda began to call me now a global citizen because they were like, oh, so where are you going next now? I was like, I have no idea. So you live, as an artist, you live in a place where you have no idea where you're going to be invited. And all of a sudden, they say, well, there's this festival in Brazil. Do you want to go play? They won't ask you which language you speak. They won't ask you what your last name sounds like. They won't ask you. They just kind of welcome you. And so music for me became a path way beyond entertainment. So specifically when I came here at Leaf, and then Leaf had the Leaf in the Schools program, that brought me back to where I grew up, because in Uganda, music was incorporated into schools. That's where we all learned to play. And when we came here, most of the performing arts centers had, evening world music shows, and in those concerts, there were never young people. So I enjoyed so much going to schools, and in those schools where we went, children had questions about Africa, about our languages, the culture, lifestyle, wildlife, social life, everything that is way beyond the music. So music was almost the door to unlock knowledge for most of these young people in North America who had been learning about the world from either television or media without meeting people from those countries. And again, learning about the work that Leaf is doing in other countries with youth, preserving culture, number 1, and 2, connecting people. So my mission now, the big question is, after those connections, what happens? And personally at Leaf, the musicians I've been playing with here, Simon Thomas George, now Jordan, and there's another, group I worked with, was to see how the connections built can actually create music and create programs that can then travel to other countries, such that there is some form of impact. And then Kevin Spears, we're working on an album now. These are all people I met at Leaf, Garfield we met not so long ago, and then I was showing his videos from Louisiana to the kids in Uganda. And when, I think the festival was last year when the kids in Uganda did a video for the kids in New Orleans. And now all the kids in Uganda, they're all asking me about New Orleans food, about, like they've been reading about this place, it's amazing. And they're like, this music sounds like our music here. I'm like, okay, interesting. So for me, what's happening is Leaf opens the door for connections and for opportunities. And I think it's up to the artists to take that to wherever, they choose. So I purposefully choose to work with artists continuously that I meet at Leaf, so that, 5-6 years later, there is some form of wonderful And through music, you learn about other cultures, you learn about other, you learn about other people in so many ways, because the music unlocks that opportunity. And then you have now the ethno youth camps that ran in Europe. I think the first one was in Sweden, Fallon. There's a small village in the north of Sweden known as Fallon. And the ethno youth camps, they were based on the foundation of bringing young musicians, especially those under the age of 25, from different countries. They put them together for 1 week, and each country teaches a song to the entire group. So at the end, so if there are 50 countries represented, there will be a concert at the end with 50 songs from 50 countries, and those songs are played by everybody from the same country. And it's amazing. It's actually incredible. The last camp I went to, there were 85 countries in Slovenia. And literally, you have rooms running with workshops. And those workshops, they don't list people's names. They list country. We have Uganda here, we have Zanzibar here, we have India. So it was fun, like you meet up for lunch and you're like, this morning, where did you go? Like, yo, I went to Ivory Coast, or I went to Nepal. Because some countries have 1 member, some countries have 2, some countries have 3. So what happened, the idea was to allow young artists learn about folk music from other places and play with each other. And the first camp was very successful in Sweden, and the second one opened in Belgium, in Tervuren, in north of Belgium. And then after they expanded, they blew like crazy. So when I was 13, I was in France, and I read about these camps. I was literally the second African artist to attend the ethno camp. The first one was from Senegal, and then I was the next one. And 2 years later, you had now artists from Malawi, from Zambia, so in Europe, you had those from Ireland doing a lot of, Celtic music. And then you have Sweden, the Polska music, and you have the Flemish musicians in Belgium. So they were predominantly, focusing on folk music, folk music styles, because a lot of young people had gone a lot into, radio and pop music, and they were losing so much, interest in folk music. So the ethno camps were designed to allow real musicians, learning fiddles, learning guitars, learning all those different instruments. So the first camp I attended, we had musicians from Tunisia, Jordan, Iran, and then 2 years later, I went to Tunisia to work with the musicians that I had met there, because their father was a doctor, but also running a concert venue there. So, and most of these musicians have actually gone to become professional musicians. But what ethno did for me, and what I think it has done for most of these young artists, by the age of 20 or 21, 22, they're connected with musicians in other countries. They start doing exchange programs. Sometimes they go on visiting each other. Like personally, after the first ethno camp, me and Suchet from India and Peter Lennartz from Belgium, we created what we call the Afro-Indian Swing Syndicate. Yeah, and then it's interesting. And then we recorded this wonderful album in a barn somewhere in a small town in Belgium. I had even forgotten about this until when Suchet, I think, sent the picture to, but the Afro-Indian Swing Syndicate was because we were in this room in Belgium. Suchet is from India, I'm from Africa, Peter Lennartz is from Belgium, but we wanted to find a name, but what was interesting, we decided everyone would bring 2 songs, and we all learned the songs. And then what happened, other camps that were created after that, And this is very, very, very powerful. Most of the camps that grew after those two camps were actually created by former ethno members. Like the following year, Suchet went and he created an ethno in India and invited these ethno musicians. Matthias Social, who was a member in the ethno camp I was in, created the ethno in Slovenia, where we went a year later. Then in Malawi, another ethno was created. So, and many years later, most of these ethno members, Alan Scrogg from India, Matthias Sosha, Suchet Malhotra from India, you see all these names, they are now actually leading most of these ethno camps in about 25 different countries around the world. So it's amazing that from a room, from being in one room, where we come from different backgrounds, different countries, ethno, I feel, gave birth to a kind of global citizenship concept to a lot of these young musicians that many years later we have all emerged to live our lives as global citizens in one way or another, touring, performing, but continuing, work with the youth. Myself, I began working with the youth in Uganda, specifically Dance of Hope. We have been building programs for bringing opportunities and possibilities in the lives of these young people, and trying to see their art and culture as something so valuable, and making them understand that it's going to be a key and a passport for them to travel around the world and change and transform their lives, and come back and become role models in their own communities. My goal is to make sure if you ask a young girl from Uganda, from Rwanda, from anywhere, who do you look up to, that they can mention a name that is from their own community, other than a name that is from, somewhere else because they see them on TV. And so communities, my goal is to make sure that we build communities among, role models among communities, and have those role models lift their communities to the global stage so that the community feels represented, but then the community also feels proud that their own young people and children are actually are successful in ways of, being, and also this is important, as artists we travel to perform and play and entertain and maybe get paid. So the concept for me is to think of what we are bringing to the places more than what we are taking away. Because if you come and you bring something, even when you're gone, whatever you bring will stay, like the impact will stay. And I think some of the work that we have created, teaching, going to schools, I've met parents, I've met college students who were in some of my classes in elementary school, and they remind me of how they got introduced to Africa, African culture and music through my work. That is really amazing because it helped them discover a whole new perception of Africa, of the culture, the things that the media doesn't, show them. So I feel for me, platforms like Leaf allow we the artists to come and make those connections, and hopefully those connections can give birth to programs and projects that can spread back to our own home countries, but also in other countries. So yeah, I will, if you have any questions for me, anything that I can maybe we can talk about, I will be more than happy. So these were not all prepared. I just kind of share everything from my head, what I feel, and I really feel very honored because Leaf is very different. Leaf is very different because the focus on young people, I feel, is actually securing a future for culture in most of these countries, where culture today has been kind of almost getting washed away. So, but when young people realize that embracing this culture is going to take us far ahead, then they start to feel that it's actually really important. And I feel, in North America with so much happening, sometimes it's difficult to to highlight most of these beautiful songs and dances and culture, you know, products from all these countries. So I feel when there is a stage or a space, pretty much a space, a safe space like Leaf, where it doesn't matter where you come from. I remember when the Dance of Hope kids came here, you know, today they still talk about Leaf in Uganda, even though they toured across the US, just because they felt a sense of belonging in the community where they came. They met the kids from Haiti, the Haitian kids that were here, some of the leaders from Rwanda who were here. And it was amazing because they're like, oh, Rwanda is next to Uganda. We get to meet them in Asheville. And they're having this amazing conversation. For me, looking at that was really beautiful. So the space here really is an open space for connections. And like true connections. You find musicians who connect here and go on to create projects. And my goal is to help support that mission, and hopefully I will be one of the products from Leaf that can extend this success globally. Thank you.
So every time that Kinobe and I have had conversations over the past 15 years now, 18 years, long time, that every time it's like a journey. So that's what I was hoping and invited him here so that several of us who hold space for Leaf, who hold space for Open Doors, that we can also start to hold these stories with Kinobe. And you said something, all these years you've been asking me, where do the seeds go intentionally? Where do we plant seeds intentionally that will grow? And until this conversation, I never knew about how ethno had been seeded, and that it makes more sense to me now why you've been asking that question, because you were part of a program that is people took the seeds from that program and then started them throughout the world in other ways.
Yes.
So anyone, I would invite everybody to ask an inquiry. This is, Kinobe might be sitting on the stage where we're used to seeing him before, but this is a conversation. And what will,
So I wanted to say thank you for allowing the kids to perform for the Brass Fest. And I wanted you to know that it opened up the minds of other people in New Orleans who really didn't understand what African music was about, and some of them were able to relate to it. It just brought a whole new scene to the brass world, like the connection that was made. We so thankful for it because they're asking for more of it. So I mean, it's just a great work that you're doing. The kids were so organized and they were so into it. All I saw was musical talent. Like, I didn't see African children, I just saw musical talent. So I just thank you for your efforts. I thank you for what you do for the music scene in the music world. I thank Leaf for introducing so many cultures to each other. I mean, it just opens up so many doors for cultures to connect. So I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for Leaf. I'm grateful for Open Doors because it gives my little boy opportunity to experience the world in a whole new different way. He sees so many diverse things, and that's really what we want.
Thank you so much. And the kids are looking so much forward to coming to New Orleans. That's like, we have talked about it. My dream is to see these kids from Uganda and the kids from New Orleans together, performing on stage. And that's like a dream, because sometimes, always what I say, get the kids from everywhere, put them in the same room. They have their own language of communication.
She's got the chills.
I did too.
I just got the chills.
And that's what's, and that's important, because I like what you say. You saw, kids making music. You didn't see, African kids just see. So because the whole concept is, most of these children, sometimes they have, challenging backgrounds. When they come into the music program, they come from very, sometimes broken lives.
Yeah.
But it was so important that that is not the tag that they wear when they go out to the world. And sometimes through their amazing music and dances and smiles, there's a lot of emotions behind. But it was intentional that their story that the world sees is a celebrated story. So when you speak to them, you can get to learn so much, but the visual that the world would see, because I did not feel it's right to people to fall in love with them or support what they do only based on being compassionate for them. So my goal was, how do we build them to be amazing artists, amazing performers, so that they can stand on a stage with any artist and feel that self-esteem and feel powerful, not being poor, not being an orphan, not being anything. So that all doesn't matter. And today, the amazing thing is now we have parents, and that's the problem we have. We have parents, schools now calling us because they want their kids now to come.
Yeah.
So when they came in the US and they go doing workshops and teaching, a child who comes from a slum in Uganda to be teaching and doing workshops, teaching kids in New York, at the Carnegie Hall, at the Kennedy Center, when they go home, their lives totally transformed. Their community, so they go back as, young stars. They're still, humble, they're still amazing, but their self-esteem is totally uplifted in a way. So now when they did that video, in their mind, they'd be like, wow, would love, because they went and they've been looking at brass music in New Orleans. They're like, wow, this music is, so they are, every single day, they are dreaming being in a room with the kids from New Orleans and making music. And it was all a connection that happened through Leaf, because Leaf allowed us to meet. That's how I met Garfield. We had that conversation 2 years ago up there in the house in Black Mountain, and we talked about, how about we get these kids from Uganda and the kids from New Orleans, they stuck together. So but when those kids put them together, you and I will have no control what they can create.
Right.
10 years later, they will have like a global project of art and music.
Yes, that'll be
and
awesome.
I think our role is to make those connections and create the opportunities. So thank you for doing the same for the children in New Orleans. Yes.
Quick question. So if you could define global citizenship, how would you define that? Because that's the theme of our upcoming Leaf Festival, and I would love more of a better definition. For it.
Yeah.
We have it prepared
And I think everyone will have their own definition depending on how they perceive it. Because for me personally, even like I said before the global part, it's about the citizenship part. Being a citizen of something is feeling that you belong there, feeling that you have access to go there, feeling that if you want to travel, you need no permission, you need no request, you actually, almost like a bird. A bird is a global citizen, they fly from border to border. So, but to go in a place, you need to have what you need. You need to have either a car or a passport or a visa. So for me, I feel music is the path to everywhere I want to be. And art is the vehicle for me to bring my music and travel and go to places. So, and then if my music is, people in those places fall in love with it and they like it, and I go and I feel like I'm doing something, because if you go as a visitor in a place, you're not a citizen. As a visitor, you go, you visit, and you go home. As a citizen, that's where you construct a home. That's where you build a home. That's where you have friends. So I feel as musicians, when we go and plant seeds in places, we'll always keep going back. And even if we don't physically go, our